Good morning. Artist Journal, August 30th, 2022, Berlin. My name is Adrian Pocobelli, your artist reporter, who has seen incredible development and just incredible drops in the last 24 hours. The abundance, the sheer abundance of interesting, good art on object.com or Tezos ecosystem is remarkable. It is remarkable. For example, let's get into it. We have this Gloom Tube, one of one, that was dropped. I mean, again, Gloom Tube is one of these, what I would call native internet artists who really arrived and grew out of the open platform that is the object ecosystem. In a sense, again, this isn't gatekept. There's no gatekeepers here like on, unfortunately, well, I mean, there's a debate that could be had. I was going to say, unfortunately, on some of the Ethereum platforms. And again, like, there could be good reason. I mean, I understand why they gatekept, because they didn't just want clip art and just a whole, because you do get that on object and you'll get everything. They wanted to just kind of make sure these people are, what they could call credible artists. That's what I'm assuming. And so you understand why that happens, because they're trying to make their platform look great. But as part of that filter process, you actually miss a lot of these great artists that maybe just don't want to apply, don't want to feel like, oh, what do I owe you? Who are you to tell me, what I should do with my work? So I think the Tezos, part of what makes the Tezos ecosystem so strong is it has a lot of these artists that really, there was no gate. They could just start. And remarkably, it worked. Like it didn't, there's some old, I can't remember the name, there was some old internet art platform, and it never really interested me because the art was all just kind of, repulsive is a strong word. But it was all a little just like cringe. At least that was the impression. So I never really took it too seriously. These are like 10 years ago, something art, I can't remember. I mean, I'm sure there were great artists on it, don't get me wrong. So anyway, where I want to go is with this Gloom Tube. So this was dropped yesterday. And you have the Gloom Tube character, some tattoos, very important iconography here with the shoes. This is something we see across the whole ecosystem, we could say, or across object in particular. I mean, it's almost like a Tezos thing. I'm sure you see it on some Ethereum artists, but it is almost a bit of a Tezos thing. These shoes and these kind of modern contemporary brands that are being worked with. And this brings up an interesting issue of, put it this way, if you look at the contemporary art galleries, which I go to less and less. Maybe I should start going more. I mean, maybe they've changed. I mean, I used to go like to 6 or 7 shows a week. I'm in Berlin. I mean, that's what you do out here in a lot of ways. But yeah, you don't see, like you might see here and there, this kind of commentary with these kind of modern brands. But as we'll see, like this is something you see in Rat Cloaksy, you see it in Myth, you see it in, I think, Kappa. You see it in all sorts. It's all across. You'll see maybe in 3A, 5A, 1A, these references to contemporary clothing brands, which again, it shows that there is a influence that's happening here as well. And I'd argue this is a structural advantage that digital artists have over contemporary artists who may not be looking at the same amount of images that, say, these digital artists on object are every morning. Or like we're taking in a lot of art. It's easy to forget. We're taking in a lot of digital art on a daily basis. And today's show is just going to be a sample of 24 hours in the life of Tezos, and it's remarkable. So again, let's go back to the work. So classic Gloom Tube, where it's just this kind of America in decline is kind of the theme, suburban wasteland, right? We see this kind of multicolored hatchback, painted different colors, which is kind of interesting in itself. Tezos is the way. Another kind of hat tip to the ecosystem. CIA. You have garbage, like a park that hasn't been cleaned up. Like we've all been in a park or after a big rave or techno party or you name it. Again, this idea of decline. An interesting take on clouds. Like Myth will do white on blue, which is super beautiful. Here, Gloom Tube decided to do pale blue on blue, which is also very effective and interesting and original. I mean, Gloom Tube has a really quite original style. And, this broken glass, again, a beautiful work. If I had been awake, I would have been tempted. This went for 300. He listed it for. Gloom Tube listed it, and Sunday Fun Day, it was up there for almost an hour, for 50 minutes, again, this one of one. So for $450, you could get this, modern masterpiece might be an overstatement, but let's see, let's give it 5 or 10 years. And then how will people see this image? It's a really fascinating question, isn't it? Because in a sense, as art collectors, we're kind of betting on time, that time will validate us. Because right now, you can get it for $450. I guess as a collector, you're kind of going, well, you're not just going to give $450 for a pretty picture. You can get that for like 3 Tezos, You're getting, if you're spending $450, you're kind of doing it to own it and to be a collector and it's a bit of an investment as well, right? And you're investing in that this is a great artist. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens here. So that happened at 4 a.m. So I was asleep while all that happened, Berlin time. We have a new Myth one of one. News, read all about it. We've got a big headline here, a new Myth one of one. Again, modern, contemporary clothing. Even here, this green hat to a certain degree could be under that category, although of course the logos are a more strong version of this. And interesting title on this, guys. The Myth and Daniel Premonitions, the Myth 2022. So he's back. You see the trademark, lime green and soft pink, these almost pastels. These two colors are almost in all of Myth's work. It's like totally trademark. Very interesting. And, we take for granted how kind of original. He's just making the paint come out of his hand. I mean, that's pretty interesting. We have the Myth here with the super intense eyes. We have the pendants. So just looking at the iconography here, we have the lemon head here. And for whatever reason, the lemon head guy is wearing the Pepe. I guess that makes sense. You don't want him to wear the lemon head pendant. It's hard to tell if these are the same person. Is this like the alter ego here? And then they both have the dripping kind of blood from the eye, smoking a cigarette. So interesting iconography. The maybe most shocking is the white background. The white background, I'd argue, is almost shocking. It's if he wanted to just unload these things and just kind of squeeze everybody for all they're worth, blue sky in the clouds is always pretty. But Myth has an art. He's got a poetry to tell here. So, I think that's a very interesting decision. A very interesting decision. Okay? So we have that. Now, technically, there are also some very interesting things. You might not be able to see it here, but this doesn't look like it was made in Microsoft Paint, which is pretty trademark Myth, but he does go around. He's even got photos, in his feed. Let's just look at it very quickly of what looks like a real life person. Where is that? If we go low to high. Yeah. I mean, so he's not just Microsoft Paint. He's even like, this looks like a photo, right? I mean, so it's a paper mache, mask. So let me just fix my screen again. There we go. So that is very interesting as well. So I think he made this on Procreate because he was tweeting an image of him in Procreate. So this was probably, I'm guessing that this was made with Procreate because it almost seems like a pencil crayon kind of tool or a colored pencil. And so right now, there's one offer on this for 35 Tezos from 3A, 5A, 1A. And I think he's just taking offers on it. I'm not sure if there's a time limit on it. He just posted this at 1 in the morning. So again, you see the abundance here, or we're starting to see. So it's tempting to put a bid in, but again, other people can jump in and get their one of one miss, and I don't have endless, funds here. We have a new kappa, and it's very interesting. Again, the North Face, right? And they like the North Face, these guys. So very interesting. And of course, kappa, the development that he's had is remarkable, and it's another testament to the fast-moving NFT scene. Like, we'll come back to this in a second, but I just want to go back. He's put out these 4 really great works in a row here, like in terms of composition. You could debate this one. They're all good, okay? But I'm particularly impressed with just like the dynamism of his compositions. We have the bathtub one. Like, look at the angle on this. Kappa has come a long way from, and we'll look at the circular staircase, like very interesting dynamic compositions we have going on here. I love this composition. I found the contrast of a ton of things with just almost an empty blue sky with a just sort of soft, kind of separated gradient here. That makes a really cool contrast. Almost nothing and plenitude, which is the theme of this show, really. I just want to show you like how far he has come. Again, I'd say he's kind of well known for these works. He put out quite a few. I have a few of them myself. This was maybe the first kappa work, but you see the development here, and you even see the North Face way back then, Antisocial Club, again, contemporary clothing, which makes this kind of interesting as well. I really like this composition, even though I was like, well, I don't know about this cartoony style, but this is a cool work. This is in May. So look at how far kappa has come in like 4 short months. Was it May, June, July, August? 4 months. So, let's go back to that work. So again, this is modern clothing. Shoes, no brand on the shoes, but I think these look like Vans or something that don't have the logo on them. Because I think the original doesn't have the logo. They're just black Vans. That's what it looks like to me. That work we were just looking at from 5 works ago, that is in the frame here. Another kind of classic machine guns. I mean, yeah. So I don't know. I looked up. I couldn't find out where he's from. I think he's from Latin America. So another edgy work, and the guy with the cigar. You got a Dali hat tip here. So a few Pepes. So interesting. Continuing on, we have Sabato has a new drawing exercise, and he was tweeting like, I don't even want to call these drawing exercises anymore. These are just artworks because they seem to be going somewhere, basically. So this came out. Interestingly, just like Myth is taking offers, okay? So he put out on Twitter, he's taking offers. Sabato also has come out with this offers thing. He said, above 6 Tezos and by midnight my time. I looked up because I had no idea where he lives. It's Massachusetts, so I would think he'd be taking these by now. I think it's 10:27 here. Anyway, maybe soon. He's got like 35 of these, so you can get in. You could probably put in 6 Tezos and get one. Very interesting work. This is part of almost a genre that uses like retro tools, like, so this uses, I think, deluxe Amiga Deluxe Paint. It's using some emulator to use these old, 1980s, maybe 1990s drawing programs. And he's really kind of made it his own. He's done some really interesting things with it, even a little bird up there in the top left-hand corner. Looks like some sort of living space. He has a very long write-up on this. I'm not a fan of big, long write-ups, but, it's a free country. This is what I see in the contemporary art galleries. And so I don't generally read these things. Some people do. And if you're an artist, you can do whatever you want. Maybe I'll make some big write-up one day, Created in Deluxe Paint 4 on an emulated Amiga A1200 computer. And yeah, he's got a couple of quotes. The Nakajin capsule tower began disassembly on... Okay, so it's based on some other reference. Okay, but very nice. So again, the plenitude, the abundance on Tezos. This was listed at, I believe, 10 o'clock yesterday. So this is all within 24 hours, guys. We also had Sumi Ray with her new AI works. She started a new account, which is probably a smart idea. I actually like what she did by putting her AI works in a separate category. This one sold out right away. And you see, I think she mentioned there's a Matisse kind of thing going on, and you can kind of see it in the color and in the style. I think she's been working on these for months, or at least the AI process. And so she's back to her rooms, and she put out a second one. So this one came out yesterday, or the 28th of August, so I guess a day and a half ago. And then she put out this one yesterday. You can still get it for 3 Tezos at $4.32. So an interesting AI work. Let's just look at Matisse very quickly. Matisse rooms. Because you will start to see, I hesitate to load up these websites because they're going to just start blocking you and create all these issues. But we see, so you start to see the similarities, at least in palette. And so, interesting to just kind of look at this stuff. I haven't seen a lot of these Matisses. And so, you could argue hers are just as nice. You could argue that. Probably a lot of people might debate that, but she's doing really interesting things here. So again, another day in the life, and Popple puts out a work. Now, this is another one of his interesting sort of what I'd call a pixel art work. Yeah, he calls it pixel art and generative art. So probably this top thing is generated. Let's just maximize it. And we got kind of like this warrior bird-like figure with a big staff, which I'll show you what that reminds me of. That reminds me of Max Ernst again, Europe After the Rain. You tell me if you think there's an influence here. I was just looking at this. A classic surrealist work using the decalcomania technique, which we can get into. Basically, the decalcomania technique, you see this tree here? What Ernst would do is the technique is basically putting some paint on a surface, putting a piece of paper, and then lifting it, right? We've almost all seen this and done this as kids with like glue and with paint and whatever. He would use that as a starting point as a surrealist, and he would start to see things, just like we see things in the clouds. This is a Leonardo da Vinci notebook thing, like, to exercise your imagination, look in the clouds and see all the different things you can see. So there's an interesting kind of history on this whole idea of seeing things. And it's part of, this almost takes us back to Dali, the paranoid imagination, and almost Freud and wish fulfillment. Like, I remember being at a techno party like 20 years ago, and there was no chairs, and it was kind of dark, and I started to see like, oh, is that a chair over there? And then I'd get close and it wasn't a chair. So the mind sort of fills in what it wants to see, one would argue, or it starts to fill in images, which is kind of an interesting thing. So Ernst plays off of this and builds paintings around it. And so that's not what I wanted to get into here. I want to get into this figure here, this bird figure. So we see a huge similarity here, at least I do, and he's got this big staff. I mean, it's not rendered the same. It's almost at a different angle here, and it could be totally accidental. It's not like having a warrior with a spear is original to Max Ernst, but I mean, the fact that it's kind of a bird, kind of barbarian figure does kind of remind me of this. Now, this painting, finally, and we're ending here, Europe After the Rain is Europe after World War II. Okay, and it's kind of like this hollowed out landscape, and people serve, this bird-like figure and whatever, this kind of stony woman surveying the landscape. Europe After the Rain, a powerful, powerful piece. Now, was this created before or after World War II? 1940 to 42, so it's actually during World War II. And Ernst came up with the decalcomania technique, I believe, when he was in a French prison camp during World War II, if I remember correctly. And lest we forget, I almost missed Junk and Terry Visual, the Kurt Hustle Collective. Let's just play this, and again, they deserve their own episode here. But I wasn't a big video art before Junk and LB, but especially Junk and Terry Visual. But I love their work, and they just made a drop too. I mean, to me, this is way funner and more exciting than contemporary art gallery videos that I see, which I often are just kind of too obscure, have a lot of heaviness to them. This is just kind of hilarious with a commentary on something, like, right? I mean, scales of justice. We see talk show, almost this game show. I sometimes call Western civilization a big game show these days. The West is, and he seems to be kind of playing on a similar sort of, he's kind of satirizing and commenting, or both of them, Junk and Terry Visual, the Kurt Hustle Collective, on this kind of, West that's just like, this American culture that's just kind of very surface and just out of control media world that you and me probably grew up in. I grew up in the, again, 80s and mostly the 90s. And, this just reminds me of 90s television. And there's even 1997 900. So anyways, Junk has a new drop. So the abundance of Tezos is where I'm going with this week's episode. That was the last 24 hours. And we're kind of just scratching the surface here. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Till next time, take care.